And now onto our dinosaur of the day, Majungasaurus, which was a request from Cole via Patreon, so thanks, Cole. It was an abelisaur that lived in the Cretaceous in what is now Madagascar, and the name means Majunga dome. The type species, and only species, is Majungasaurus crenatissimus, and the species name means most notched and refers to all the serrations on its teeth. Must be a lot. For a while, it was called Majungatholus, and now that's considered to be a junior synonym. Charles Depéret, a French paleontologist, described the first theropod fossils from Madagascar in 1896, based on 2 teeth, a claw, and some vertebrae that French scientists who were with the French military had found. These fossils were classified as Megalosaurus, which was a wastebasket taxon, so many things were classified as Megalosaurus to begin with. And then it was named a new species, Megalosaurus crenatissimus. Later, Depéret reassigned these fossils to Dryptosaurus. The fossils were found in 1895, and that's when these French scientists with the French military were on an expedition to secure the island from the British.
Good old French and British fighting back and forth all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Over the next 100 years, French collectors found more fragments in the Majunga province in Madagascar, and René Lavocat described theropod teeth in 1955, and those teeth matched the teeth that Depéret had described earlier, but Lavocat also described a strongly curved jawbone that was different from Megalosaurus and Dryptosaurus. So based on this dentary, Lavocat made a new genus and named it Majungasaurus. Majungasaurus is an older spelling of Majunga.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. In 1979, Hans Dieter Suess and Philip Taquet described a dome-shaped skull fragment as Majungatholus autopus, a pachycephalosaur, and the first one described in the Southern Hemisphere. In 1993, a team from the State University of New York at Stony Brook and the University of Antananarivo started the Majunga Basin Project, which were a number of expeditions to the Majunga province. On the first expedition, they found hundreds of theropod teeth that looked like Majungasaurus. Over the course of 7 expeditions, they found tens of thousands of fossils, many which were new species. In 1996, scientists found a complete theropod skull which had a dome-shaped horn on the top, similar to the dome that Suess and Taquet described as Majungatholus autopus. In 1998, Majungatholus was redescribed as an abelisaurid instead of a pachycephalosaur. And
pretty big difference.
Yes. Majungasaurus crenatissimus was named before Majungatholus autopus, but scientists thought that what was described as Majungasaurus was too fragmentary to assign to the new species as this skull. Over the next 10 years, more skulls that were less complete were found, as well as partial juvenile and adult skeletons, and isolated bones and thousands of shed teeth. All of these together form a nearly complete skeleton, though most of the forelimbs, pelvis, and tip of the tail are not known. In 2007, all those bones were part of a monograph made up of 7 scientific papers on all aspects of Majungasaurus, based on material found between 1993 and 2001. The dentary that Lavocat had found was reevaluated and found to be characteristic for the new species, so the name Majungasaurus replaced Majungatholus. David Krause from Stony Brook University, and who was part of the Majunga Basin Project, decided to give back to the local community in Madagascar who helped him throughout the years on his expeditions. They told him they wanted education for their children and needed to hire a teacher, which cost $500 per year. And he and his team raised the money for the teacher's salary, and in 1998, Krause founded the Madagascar and Kinsey Fund, named after the Malagasy word for children, and they've built schools and provided healthcare.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's just a fun little side fact.
Yeah.
And Krause was the one who had helped find the Majungasaurus skull back in 1996. So Majungasaurus is one of the best studied theropods from the Southern Hemisphere. It seems to be more closely related to abelisaurids from India than abelisaurids from South America or Africa. It was bipedal with a short snout and was about 20 to 23 feet or 6 to 7 meters long, though there are estimates based on fragments of some being as long as 26 feet or 8 meters. It weighed about 2,400 pounds, 1,100 kilograms, though larger ones may have weighed up to 3,300 pounds, or about 1,500 kilograms. It had a long tail to help keep its balance, and it had short forelimbs with stocky hind limbs. Majungasaurus had 4 digits on each hand, though it was originally thought to only have 2 digits and no claws. And this is because the first specimen studied had no pits and grooves where claws would normally be attached, and its finger bones were fused together, so that made it look like the hand was immobile. A 2012 study of another specimen, though, found 4 digits that were very short and inflexible, and it had small claws on the second and third digits. Majungasaurus's feet had 3 digits. It had a strong muscular neck and a wide, short skull, and it had a rounded dome-like horn on the roof of the skull, which was originally thought to be a pachycephalosaur dome. The skull had a rough texture, and it had nasal bones that were thick and fused together. The horn on top of the skull was probably covered with keratin. CT scans found that the nasal structure and horn on the top of the head had hollow sinus cavities, possibly to reduce weight. Majungasaurus probably competed with each other using the fused nasals and the horn on top of their heads, though how they did that is unclear. The horn's hollow cavity means it was not strong enough to use for fighting and was probably more for display. Majungasaurus had some variation in the horns, but no evidence of sexual dimorphism. As Majungasaurus grew and became older, its skull got taller and more robust, and the skull bones were more fused, and its eye sockets became smaller. This shows that juveniles and adults probably had different diets. Michael Demick's research shows that it was one of the slowest growing theropods based on lines of arrested growth on the bones, so it took Majungasaurus about 20 years to mature. A CT scan of a complete skull allowed scientists to reconstruct the brain and inner ear structure. The brain was small relative to its body size, but was similar to other non-Coelurosauran theropods. One difference is, compared to other theropods, Majungasaurus had a smaller flockus, which controls balance coordination. And because of this, it probably didn't move its head quickly to look for and go after prey. Also, its inner ear shows that it held its head straight and horizontal to the ground, so it probably went after slower prey like large sauropods.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was an apex predator that possibly preyed on Depéret, which is a sauropod. It had more teeth in its upper and lower jaws compared to other abelosaurids, and it may have bitten its prey and held on to it until its prey stopped fighting, so it's this bite and hold approach. Majungasaurus had a flexible lower jaw, which may have helped prevent fractures when holding onto its prey. The teeth curved on the front edge but were straighter in the back, possibly to hold teeth in place when biting instead of slicing prey. It probably specialized in hunting sauropods. Its stocky legs would have helped it with the bite and hold approach, and it didn't need to be as fast to go after these slower sauropods. Poor sauropods. Majungasaurus tooth marks have been found on Depéret, so it did eat these sauropods, though it's not clear if it killed them. Majungasaurus is also one of the few dinosaurs with direct evidence of cannibalism. In 2007, scientists published about some finds that showed Majungasaurus practiced cannibalism. Majungasaurus bones were found with tooth marks that looked the same as tooth marks found on sauropods in the area. Many of the bite marks on Majungasaurus were on limb bones that were only accessible during lethal combat. This is according to Scott Sampson in Dinosaur Odyssey. Majungasaurus is the only large known theropod in the area, so that probably means they fed on each other. It's not clear if Majungasaurus hunted each other or just scavenged carcasses, though Komodo dragons sometimes kill each other in feeding frenzies of carcasses, so maybe that's what happened. Scientists have been able to reconstruct Majungasaurus's respiratory system. It had air sacs like modern birds that allowed for a flow-through ventilation, which means the air flows through the lungs one way. Air inhaled is never mixed with air exhaled, and this is pretty efficient.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Dinosaurs could really breathe awesomely.
They really knew how to breathe.
They really did. I wish I could breathe like a dinosaur.
So this shows the split between Ceratosaurus, which led to Majungasaurus, and the Tetanorans, which led to birds, happened early on with theropods. This common avian respiratory system would have evolved before the split, and it helps show that birds are dinosaurs. In 2007, a report described 4 Majungasaurus pathologies based on the remains of 21 individuals. There were no wounds found on the skull, but one had a broken and healed toe bone. Another had a bony growth on the underside of a back vertebra, probably from cartilage conversion during development. Another had abnormal growth on its tail vertebra, probably from ossification of a ligament. And another had abnormalities on 5 large tail vertebrae. 3 were fused together at multiple points, making a solid bony mass. There was no sign of other vertebrae after the 5th one, so the tail was shorter than most. It was about 10 vertebrae short. This could be from severe trauma that resulted in losing the tip of the tail and then infection, or maybe the infection came first and then part of the tail fell off. It's the first example of tail truncation found in a non-avian theropod. Sounds
Yikes.
painful, yeah.
Yeah.
Majungasaurus lived in a semi-arid climate on a coastal floodplain. Sea levels were rising at the time, and Madagascar was an island even when Majungasaurus was around. It lived in an area that had wet and dry seasons, and each year animals that died from lack of water were then swept away by water during the wet season and buried, which led to lots of preserved fossils. Other animals that lived at the same time and place as Majungasaurus include fish, frogs, lizards, snakes, crocodilomorphs, and some mammals and birds, as well as the notosaurid, Majungasaurus, 2 titanosaurs, including Depéret, and also possibly the dromaeosaurid Rahonavis. You can see Majungasaurus in the media. Actually, part of Indominus Rex's DNA in Jurassic World is Majungasaurus. And you can see Majungasaurus in the 5th episode of the miniseries When Dinosaurs Ruled, hosted by Jeff Goldblum. You can also see Majungasaurus in the 1st episode of Jurassic Fight Club, where they're talking about its cannibalism. Both shows, in that case, call it Majungatholus. And you can see Majungasaurus also in BBC's Planet Dinosaur, and in that show it's called Majungasaurus.